A reptilian humanoid named Glimpy sat in his transport using a dermal regenerator. Glimpy's reptilian humanoid species looks very close to human considering he's reptilian. Definitely doesn't look like a walking iguana. That is, except for the eyes, horns, tail, and taloned feet. During this time, he uses his 4 digits to maneuver the dermal regenerator and feels a lot of pain as the machine works its magic. He thinks, maybe I got some busted bones too. Ugh. Every time he moved to try and swipe the dermal generator across his face to try and stop himself from bleeding and hopefully not have any scars. He thinks to himself, well, maybe I'll have to use the regenerator pod when I get to the house. Ugh. Damn, this hurts. He looks over at the bar he just came from and curses under his breath. He thinks about what just happened a few minutes prior. He was generally angry that day, so he decided to go to a human bar, or sometimes they call it pub, he still doesn't understand which one, to talk poorly about humans. This way he'd get his frustrations out and he wouldn't have to deal with it internally. He figured he would go in, insult their culture, their looks, and spit out their drinks regardless of the taste, and this would show them that they are worse than he is. They are under his tail. And when it's all said and done, he'll feel a whole lot better. Walking in, he makes sure his tail accidentally strikes the seats of every single human he passed, never even bothering to turn, apologizing, or anything like that, which did anger everyone, but they pretty soon went back to their drinks and their conversation. He was still angry when he got to the bar, thinking about how he lost a potentially high-paying job to a human. A human! Out of everything, a human, a brand new species. He's barely dealt with them before, but he still doesn't like them. Seems like they're taking all the good jobs. So he decided to come to this bar to take all of his anger out. As he stood at the bar, refusing to take a seat, he loudly slammed his fist down and demanded a drink. The bartender simply walks over and asks for his order. A polite young lady who stands there in a bit of a uniform. He demands their best drink be brought before him, and he will not take no for an answer. The bartender gives him the price of this drink, reminds him that it's very expensive, and requires payment before she can go get it. Insulted again that a human of all things would say this to him, he commented to the bartender how ugly and incompetent she was, how she was nothing but a hairless yet still furry ape. The bar got very quiet as he said this. He did notice, but didn't even turn, figuring they were beneath him. He then again demands the absolute best drink they have, and again she politely tells him to pay first due to the exorbitant price of the drink. The price, he suddenly thinks, and it shocks him. He thinks to himself, who could possibly afford something like that? Holy shit. So he simply turns, raises his 4-fingered clawed hand towards the taps and demands the amber liquid then. Being a little frustrated with him, she goes, grabs a mug, and pours the absolute cheapest beer they have on tap. He accepts the beer, yet he doesn't even acknowledge it, simply grabbing the mug, opens his maw, pours down, but before he can even swallow, he gets a mouthful and spits it out, even though internally he's thinking how refreshing the drink was. The bartender immediately backs away, dripping wet from the drink, as he simply slams down the mug, demanding that she pay him for such a horrible human drink. How could humans possibly consume something so disgusting? Ugh, something better. I demand something better from you inferior creatures. He begins to insult their culture, how they don't know anything about space travel, and how they seem to insult everybody just by their presence. He's disgusted at their food and drinks seem they're only suitable for the lowest form of life, even raising his tail, motioning away, saying how everyone in the bar was so low, below his own standing. He even waved his arms, saying about the architecture, how it's primitive beyond belief, akin to a cave dwelling, and then went more onto the culture, how humans are obsessed with personal pleasures, and they are simply a soft species, and too stupid and unable to grasp basic concepts. And hell, they even look all pale and hairy, which he even said that with a sneer. The bartender, still cleaning up herself after the spill, wiping herself down, calmly looks over and tells Glimpy to leave if he's not satisfied. He simply slams his hand down again and demands another refreshment. The bartender is extremely hesitant as she goes and gets a different beer. This time, a dark beer, since he didn't like the one that was a little bit of a pale ale. He drinks and once again spits it out onto her and throws the glass against the wall. He insults the drink as though internally he would actually like more of it. This gross brown liquid, ugh, bitter, disgusting, ugh. The bartender is thoroughly annoyed at this point, but as calm as she can, she simply tells him to leave. You do not tell me what I have to do. Just a human, not even worth wiping the waste off my tail. You do not tell me anything. And then he simply demands another drink. The bartender actually demands that he leaves, but not thrashing around, not striking anything, but firmly telling him that he has to leave. Clippy again insults them by saying, Who would make me? You're weak like pitiful insectoids. And as he turned around to address the entire crowd to insult them, he suddenly realized he was face to face with multiple very broad humans that had stood up. It's the first time he's seen them as tall or taller than him. One of them stood much closer, only about a meter away, if that. And he said, Pay your tab and leave. Insolent! Glimpy swings and strikes the human in the face with his open palm. The nails draw blood as they scrape across, yet the human barely even moved. All the other patrons, seeing this, got up and moved out of the way. As they did, they pulled the chairs away and then the tables. Glimpy looked at this action and was confused. The man, during this time, reaches up with his palm, checks his face, wipes down, and sees the blood. He then turns to the bartender and says, Don't worry, I'll pay for the mess. Glimpy is confused and swung again at the human. The human caught his arm just below the wrist and twisted it as hard as he could. Glimpy bent down as he realized his joints were being twisted to the point where they just might pop out. In response, he swung his tail as hard as it could. This very large and dense tail was actually their primary weapon, as no one wanted to be hit by it. It came in with such speed and such force that usually it would knock someone over or something. It hits the torso with a loud thump on the human. Yet the human didn't even flinch as the sounds of the tail striking and what seemed to be the very light sound of ribs slightly giving under on the pressure. Around the room there was no other sound except for the human music. The human then raised his other hand, the one not holding Glimpy's arm, made a fist, and drives it across Glimpy's face with such force that blood sprays across. Everyone can hear the sickening crunch as he hits. The human does not stop and swings one powerful hand on them as another. He had already released the wrist, and Glimpy is trying to defend himself. Yet no matter the defensive measures, whether he swung his tail or swung his claws, the human just keeps swinging, and with each concussive force drives him back more and more. Eventually, Glimpy is on the ground defending himself. The human stands up, grabs his tail, and begins to drag him towards the door. With everyone moved out of the way, the human stops, seems to think about something, and have a slight grin on his face. Then, grabbing the tail with both hands, begin to swing around Clumpy by his tail 1, 2 times, and then sent him flying out the door, landing in a heap with a very satisfying thump. Now he sits on his transport, watching the bar, and tries to figure out his next move. Should he get a weapon and go in there? Should he get a bunch of friends and just overwhelm them with numbers? As he thinks about this, he sees a pair of fellow reptilians and asks them to join him in fighting humans after they come over. They look at each other and then start laughing in his face. The first one looks at him and says, "Are you insane?" At least, he tries to say that in between gasps of laughter. Then, as they calm down, they simply tell him to hold on and listen to a simple truth about humans. Humans don't give a fuck as long as etiquette is followed. Break that and prepare for trouble. Glimpy looks at them and says, "How can a single human suddenly be so difficult? I mean, he wouldn't stop striking me no matter how many times I cut him, how many times I struck him." Another one of the two simply laughed even harder. "When humans drink, they first lose feeling in their pain receptors. I mean, they feel it in the morning. You'll know this because you'll see them hanging themselves over the side of something as they regurgitate all over the place, screaming about how never again, oh, the pain. Yet they'll still do it. It's similar to when you see humans in combat. I'm sure you've heard about it. When their adrenaline, which is a natural byproduct in humans, starts pumping, they feel no pain at the moment. Later they will. Glippy, then I should wait until they are sober? Do that and they'll kill you. Why? You've never heard? All humans lead to the side. Huh? At this point, the two that had just shown up see a human leaving the bar and actually wave to him and ask him if he can come over for a moment. Politely, he walks over and says, "Sure, what can I help you with?" This one here is misunderstanding humans, and we understand that all humans lean to the side. Could you possibly show him why? The human looks up at Glimpy, and then recognizes him from the bar and smiles. Sure. With practiced precision, the man reached under his clothes and drew two different pieces of metal. One was a fairly large blade, and the other one was a pistol. He then pointed the pistol at Glimpsy's head and said, "So, anything else?" "No, that is all. Thank you." The man simply said, "You're welcome," and then very calmly holstered his pistol, put the knife back in the sheath, and walked away as though nothing happened. Glimpy at this point, eyes still wide, realizing that he could have just had his brains removed from his head at that moment, finally comes back to his senses a little bit and swallows very hard. Why did they not use that on me before? Bar etiquette. What? You don't draw metal unless you believe your life is in danger. That's the human rule. They all have metal on them, but that's the rule. It keeps them from killing each other. So they don't consider us a threat? After all this, how? They're so squishy. Both of the reptilians started to laugh again before they responded. This is why it's best to mind your manners with humans. They may seem soft on the outside, but they can be harder to break than Bhaskar if you make them angry. Keep that in mind. Glimpy thought for a moment, a long moment, and then looked at the two and said, "Thank you for your advice. In appreciation, I would like to buy you both a drink." Both the reptilians stopped for a moment, looked at each other, smiled, and then looked back at Glimpy. And one said, "See? Now you're getting it." Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you very much for joining me on today's story. Before I go, I need to let you know that today's story was actually recommended by one of my fans on our weekly live stream every week at 18:30 Eastern Standard Time. Speaking of which, before I go, I need to send out a big thank you to one of my channel supporters, Ava Clark. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Everyone else, I will see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.